Hello, everyone. My name is Shelley Calhoun Jones, and today we're going to be covering data protection and hardening within AWS. And so, in this session, we're going to take a look at some common challenges that organizations run into when implementing cloud security. We're also going to take a look at the shared responsibility model, which is a framework that's used by a lot of cloud providers like Amazon Web Services. We're also going to take a look at the zero trust security approach, including the new zero trust maturity model, which was just released by CISA last month. So we're going to cover that and then talk about how you can utilize Cohesity solutions for making sure that you meet your security goals. And then at the end of this session, we're also going to do a short demonstration where I'll take you into Data Protect, and we'll take a look at how we can secure AWS workloads using Cohesity. But let's go ahead and take a look at some common challenges that organizations often run into when implementing cloud security. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn on my laser pointer here for just a moment. But I want to call out here that, for a lot of companies out there, you may not just be working with one cloud provider, you could be working with multiple cloud providers. And sometimes it can feel like the Wild West, depending on the size of your organization, because you may not just be managing one account, but you could be managing dozens or even hundreds of different cloud accounts. And so what I've done is I've gathered some common challenges that organizations run into, and these are actually pulled from resources like the Open Web Application Security Project. In fact, with misconfigurations, this is actually on the top 6 of top 10 security risks that organizations run into. And when we say a misconfiguration, this could be an open cloud storage share, it could be that you have logging disabled, or maybe you have user accounts with excessive permissions. And so all of these different variables can introduce risk and become a potential attack vector. You'll also notice that I have sensitive data here listed as well. And so when I say sensitive data, this could be that your organization needs to manage things like credentials, encryption keys, certificates for your web servers, or even API keys that you use within your applications. And then the other factor is if you do have confidential data, you could have secrets that are aging. And so there may be a need to manage these secrets in a centralized way and also automate the process of rotating them. And then you'll also notice here that I have threats listed because, any time your organization is exposed to risk, this could be a potential vector for a way that a threat could get into your environment. And so a threat could be information disclosure, it could be a denial of service attack, it could be malware. There's many different types of threats out there, but these are just a couple different examples of some of the challenges that you might run into from a cloud security perspective. But let's take a look at how we can address these challenges using the shared responsibility model. This is a framework used by many different cloud providers. And if we take a look at an example of the shared responsibility model from AWS, you can see that we actually have this broken out into 2 different divisions. So we have down here at the bottom, we have AWS, and we also have our customers, so that would be us. And the way I always like to describe this is that you can think of this as you're building a house, and you have a relationship with the person that's building your home. And so your home builder's job is to make sure that he or she is building a good concrete foundation for your home. Make sure that you have all the appropriate wiring and electricity. Make sure all of the windows and doors work, and also, make sure that you have everything that you need to move in. But once you move in, you may decide to install a security system. Especially if you live in a rough part of town, you may need to install a security system to make sure that you have visibility into your home and that you have the right level of security. And the same applies with the cloud. Your cloud provider's job is to make sure that they're responsible for the underlying infrastructure, making sure that their services are always available, always running, and that you have the capability to host your workloads. And so in this example, we can see that AWS is focused on making sure that their foundational services are running. So services like EC2, S3, RDS, virtual private cloud, also making sure that all of their regions, availability zones, and edge locations are running. So this is the framework here. This is the foundation that your cloud vendor uses to make sure that they're providing with you with the correct level of availability. But from a customer perspective, you're responsible for things like encryption. So making sure that you have the right encryption keys in place, making sure that you have the right level of permission set up for your users from an identity and access management perspective, making sure that you're applying the correct security controls. But that leads to the question, how does the shared responsibility shift if you're working with maybe something like infrastructure services versus container versus managed services? And so what I've done is I've also added an additional diagram here, which talks about how shared responsibilities shift depending on the type of workloads that you're managing. Because for a lot of companies, moving into the cloud is also an opportunity to look at your workloads and make sure that you're not dealing with server sprawl. So a good example would be maybe you have an on-prem SQL server that could be moved into a service like RDS, or a on-prem Docker deployment that can be moved into a service like ECS, which is the Elastic Container Service that AWS offers. And so when that happens, cloud providers like AWS take over more of those responsibilities, which gives you the ability to focus more on the business. And so this just basically shows how those responsibilities shift. And so as you can see, if you're working with infrastructure services, you're taking a more do-it-yourself approach. You want to have more granular control over your cloud environment. But if you want to offload some of those responsibilities to a service like Amazon RDS, you can see that the responsibilities start to shift because Amazon is going to be handling things like patching, backups, making sure that your database is highly available. And then when we get over to abstracted services like AWS Lambda, you can see that you're really just focused on the customer data and client-side data encryption. So that's a quick summary of shared responsibilities. We're going to build upon this methodology using a zero trust security approach, which is really our focus in this presentation. And so on this first slide here, you can see that with zero trust, the idea is never trust, always verify. This was actually coined by a cybersecurity expert at Forrester Research. And the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA, has built upon this framework using what's called the zero trust maturity model. And the idea is that this is helping organizations transition to a zero trust model using concepts like data analytics, automation, and orchestration to make sure that you have full visibility into your environment and that you're able to meet your governance goals. And so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this here, but I also want to let you know that if you'd like to check this out, CISA does have a landing page with a document that you can download, which covers further on the zero trust maturity model, so definitely check that out. But let's go ahead and take a look at these pillars. And so when we say identity, this could be either a human or a non-human entity. So it could be a device, it could be a service account that your IT team uses, it could be resources that are within your software-defined infrastructure, it could even be artificial intelligence. And there's been a lot of conversation around AI, and organizations are using chatbots and machine learning for automating data analytics. Really, really cool. And then we also have devices. And so CISA defines a device as any asset that can connect to a network. The device could be a server, it could be a laptop, it could be an IoT device, any type of networking equipment which makes up your infrastructure. And then if we go over to networks, just to kind of do a quick rewind here, over the last couple of years, a lot of us are working from home now. And so more employees are using their own devices to connect to network resources. So really the way that we access networks has changed over the last couple of years. And as a result, the network perimeter has changed. And so this pillar focuses on securing your network traffic. So think of things like network segmentation, using VLANs, making sure that you're using transport layer security for your workloads, if your workloads are on the web, or even internally, really. But that's a really important key pillar right there. And then if we go over, you can also see that we have our application workloads. And what's interesting about this is that for most companies out there, you may be managing workloads that are both on-prem and in the cloud. You could even be managing workloads in multiple cloud providers. And so this pillar focuses on securing your workloads and making sure that you have the appropriate application controls in place, as well as using secure coding best practices to make sure that you're preventing things like network vulnerabilities. And then at the end here, you can see that we have our data. And this is not just focused on securing your data at rest, but also focused on securing your data in transit, using concepts like encryption, security access controls to make sure that you're preventing access to sensitive data. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can secure sensitive data on upcoming slides. All right, so now that we've taken a look at the Zero Trust Maturity Model, let's take a look at how we can apply Zero Trust using AWS, because there really needs to be a balance between security and accessibility, especially if you're a business that's moving into the cloud. And so to help address these challenges, you can establish visibility into your environment using logging and automation. And so in the world of AWS, you can turn on API logging using CloudTrail. You can configure permissions using tools like identity and access management, using the mindset of least privilege, because we don't want to grant access to everything. We want to make sure that the permissions that we're setting are really focused on the user's job role. You can also manage your cloud accounts using a cloud management account. And so in the world of Amazon Web Services, they have a service called Organizations, which gives you the ability to manage your child accounts. And for most cloud providers, you have the ability to aggregate logs or even feed them into a SIEM solution like Splunk. And this is important because if you do run into an incident, having the ability to aggregate those logs gives you the ability to backtrace to what may have occurred, focusing on the cloud account that was impacted. From a protect standpoint, you can secure your credentials using tools like a secrets manager and also a key management service. For a lot of organizations, you may be storing things like database credentials, API access keys, certificates, and other types of sensitive data. A secrets manager gives you the ability to store that information securely. And what's awesome about it is that security teams can rotate credentials automatically for more security. And so Secrets Manager is a great way to make sure that you're getting that level of security. KMS solution, this is going to give you the ability to manage and distribute your encryption keys. And so this also helps with giving your organization more robust security. And then from a response standpoint, if an incident does occur, you can use what's called security automation playbooks. And so what an automation playbook can do is it can do things like event triage, open up a service ticket, maybe notify impacted parties via email or via a Slack channel. And most cloud computing providers support security automation playbooks. So this is what you can leverage on the AWS side. Let's take a closer look at how we can use Zero Trust within Cohesity Data Cloud. And it's good to use both because you want to make sure that you're using a defense in depth approach within your organization. And so from a protection standpoint, you can secure the backup and recovery process using what's called data resiliency and access controls, which are built right into the Cohesity platform. What this does is it allows you to keep an immutable copy of your backup data until you need it. And this is important because with ransomware, the attacker could target a backup environment because the attacker relies on their victim not having a valid and complete backup so that they may pay the ransom. And so this is one way that you get protection. Also, Cohesity uses what's called role-based access controls and MFA, and also features like Quorum, which is an authorization framework, which ensures that you have a quorum of approvers to approve sensitive operations. It's almost like when you walk into the bank and you're wanting to, access your safety deposit box. You're going to have a key, but another is going to be from the bank in order for you to operate. So any critical changes need to be authorized by 2 or more individuals to make sure that your data stays secure. And then from a detection standpoint, there are multiple ways that you can monitor. A good example is that you can watch for emerging threats using a feature which is called anomaly detection. Cohesity also monitors for malware and performs what's called a data classification scan. So we not only scan your backups for malware, but we're also quantifying what you're backing up so that you have a good understanding of the type of data that's being stored in your backups. So, for example, if you have a mission critical server with credit card and other PII data, we quantify that information within a data classification scan. So that's just one example. And then the other factor is that, for a lot of companies, your backup operations team may actually be managed in a completely different part of the organization than your security operations team. And so Cohesity gives you the ability to integrate into popular SIEM solutions like Splunk. It also integrates into SOAR solutions like Microsoft Sentinel and Palo Alto, and also Tenable for vulnerability management. And you can also use your existing encryption and access controls within your IAM and KMS solutions, which is why it's so important to make sure that you have a concrete foundation when it comes to security. So that is protect and detect. We also have another pillar here for recover, because from a recovery perspective, Cohesity uses a multi-pronged approach. You can find your data using what's called a global search. You can verify the integrity of your Active Directory using what's called AD comparison, and recover quickly from a known good recovery point. You'll notice down at the bottom of the screen I have included a resource which dives deeper in this topic, and also how Cohesity integrates into other security frameworks like NIST. But let's go ahead and imagine for a moment that we work for a company that recently went through an acquisition. So they have data that's on-prem, they have a handful of accounts that are used within their organization. Now we can back up resources, both from our on-prem and our AWS resources, using the Cohesity service. So a good example would be maybe we have a workload which is already running on AWS. It could be that we have a pool of EC2 instances that are connected to an RDS database. We can back up these resources using a single interface, choose the backup location, whether that be on-prem, cloud to cloud, or using managed snapshots. And so the idea is that by unifying our end-to-end infrastructure, we also have the ability to deduplicate our data. And Cohesity uses a feature called variable length data deduplication, which spans the entire cluster and helps reduce your storage footprint. And so this helps in cost savings. But one of the challenges that a lot of organizations run into is literally the sheer amount of data that they're dealing with every single day. And so from a security perspective, we want to make sure that our data is protected from threats. And if you do run into a security event, you can perform a backup and recovery quickly. And so when we back up our data, you'll notice that the in-flight data is encrypted and efficient, which means that it gets compressed and deduplicated, which gives you some additional cost savings. And then also you'll notice that once that backup data is saved, it's actually saved as time-based immutable snapshots, which is isolated from your environment. In fact, the only way to mount a backup is in read-write mode. The only way to mount a backup in read-write mode is to clone the backup. And this is done automatically by the system. And so Cohesity uses multi-factor authentication for both retrieving your backups and encryption for securing your data at rest. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and switch screens here. We're going to do a technical demonstration so I can show you the Data Protect dashboard. Let me go ahead and just switch screens here for just a moment. All right, so right now I am logged into the Cohesity platform, and you can access Data Protect, which is what we're currently in right now, using any popular browser like Chrome. And the beauty of the dashboard is that it gives you maximum visibility into your environment. And you'll notice here that we also have a Rubik's Cube up at the top of the screen. So if I wanted to, I could also switch to other services like Fort Knox or our Security Center. But for this demonstration, we're going to focus on Data Protect because this gives us the ability to not only set up protection for our physical workloads, but also for our virtual workloads. So right now we're in the sources section. As you can see in this example, we have the ability to protect sources within our AWS account. We also leverage other services like Microsoft 365, and you can also see an example here for VMware. And so this is a great example of a hybrid environment because for a lot of companies, they're not just managing on-prem workloads, but they could also be managing workloads in other environments. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my AWS account here. And you can see that in this example, we have protection for both EC2 and RDS. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to just quickly show you how you can cruise through different tabs. I can click on the RDS tab. I can see all of my RDS resources. Do note that support for S3 is coming soon, so we should soon have a tab here for S3 buckets. And so this basically just shows us resources that are both protected and unprotected. And so if I click on the EC2 tab here and I just scroll down a bit, we can see that we have an example here for a server running within EC2 called SCJ server. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this little protect icon, and this is going to take me to another screen, which is going to allow me to confirm the resources that I want to add and also specify a policy. And so in this example here, I could choose a gold policy. And if I want to learn more about this policy, I can click on more options. And this is going to allow me to go in and add in additional customized settings. But we'll go ahead and just click on protect for now. And this will take a moment. And if we just scroll back down here, and I want to click on my SCJ server, you can see that we also have the ability to see activity. So right now, we can see that a backup job has started. And we can also see that policy option from earlier. And, if you think about a policy, really it's just a collection of the how and when in which the objects from your source are protected. So it determines how frequently that backup is running. It also allows you to go in and specify a possible quiet time if you are concerned about maybe like a maintenance window or a change window. And so this just gives you the ability to have all of those settings in place. And if you need to go in, you can also just click on the edit option. So that is the process for protecting a resource. And if we just go back, you can see that we have our activity page, which is going to show us a list of recent backups, allowing us to view it within a timeline format. If we had a lot of backups that were occurring, I could also filter by things like a SLA status just to see whether or not we missed our SLA. If we missed our SLA, that would be a good indicator that we need to go in and configure or reconfigure our protection policy. I can also filter by task, and I can also filter by date range. But that's how you protect a resource. How do we go about recovering a resource? And so for that, let's go ahead and go back to our sources view. I'm going to click on my AWS account. And for this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and click on RDS. And so in this example here, I'm going to go ahead and do a recovery of my tag MySQL RDS database. And to do that, I can just click on the ellipsis here. You can see that you have the option to unprotect, which we don't really want to do. For this, we're going to just do a simple recovery. And so in the recovery window, you'll notice that we have a couple different options that we can select from. This basically allows us to either recover, to the original location, or we can recover to a new location. And for this particular demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and select new location since this is really a test that we're doing. And it's going to take just a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and choose my AWS region. Hold on a second. Oh, I got to select my account ID first. Okay, selected my account ID. The reason why it does that is that if I have multiple accounts that I'm managing within my Cohesity cluster, we want to make sure that we're selecting the correct account ID. So that's the reason why we saw that there. So now that I've selected my account ID, what I can do is I can go in, I can choose a region. And so I'm going to select North Virginia, since that's where we're primarily managing our resources right now. These are polling settings from my AWS account. And then I also have the ability to choose the virtual private cloud that I want to restore this database into. And these are settings that are already configured within my AWS account. So I am going to go ahead and just choose, hold on a second. I'm going to just choose the default VPC because after this demonstration, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and clean up my resources. We're just testing this out right now. And then we also need to go in and select a security group. Now, a security group is a set of firewall rules which basically acts as a container for like an EC2 instance. Now, I know we're working with RDS here, but really keep in mind that when you set up an RDS database, there's an EC2 instance that's hosting that database for you. The difference between having your database being hosted directly on EC2 and in a service like RDS is that you're handing off those responsibilities to Amazon. So Amazon is managing the EC2 instance for you. That being said, we still need to go in and configure our firewall rules. And so in this example, we already have firewall rules that we've configured. So I'm going to go ahead and select a network security group, and then I'm also going to choose the availability zone that I want this database to live in. So I'm going to go ahead and choose US East 1A. We also want to go in and pick a name for our test database. So I'm going to go ahead and call this SCJ Test DB. We're going to leave the database port at default. I also have the ability to go in and choose a database option group, which I'm going to go ahead and do right now. These are set up within RDS, so I'm just pulling those settings from my AWS account. And if we scroll down here, you're going to see some additional options, which I kind of want to talk you through really quick because I think they're really cool. And if you're new to working within AWS, these may be some features that you're not aware of. And so within multi-AZ deployment, what this means that is if your organization requires high availability for your workload, meaning that you always need to be online, what this feature will do is it'll allow you to have both a primary and a standby database available, running in different availability zones. And so if the primary database were for any reason to go offline, it's going to fail over to your standby database. IAM database authentication, this allows you to log into your database using your IAM user account. This is a feature within AWS. Public accessibility, I usually don't recommend turning on this feature because for most organizations, if you're hosting an SQL database within RDS, you're going to want to have that either be in a protected subnet or a private subnet. But if you do need your database to be publicly accessible, you can turn on this feature. Tags are really awesome too. What tags allow you to do is tag the type of resources that you're hosting within your AWS account. And this helps from a cost management perspective. It also helps from a security perspective because you want to know what cost center and what team a particular resource belongs to. For example, if you're doing an application upgrade for a business application within your environment, you might want to tag it with a particular version number. If you're doing a test upgrade, you can map it to a cost center from a cost and billing perspective, or just, quantify the type of resources across your org. For example, you may have specific resources that are used by your security team or by your sales team. So it's a powerful feature and it's used a lot in the world of automation because it gives you the ability to set up automated scripts that you can run within your environment. You'll also see that we have an option here for auto minor version upgrade, which basically means that if you turn on this feature, if a minor update comes out for your RDS instance, this gives the green light for AWS to upgrade those instances for you, and that helps from a security perspective. So now that we've entered in all of our settings, I'm going to go ahead and click on Recover, and this is going to begin the recovery process. If I want to click on my resource that I just started to recover, hold on a second, I should see some options come up here in just a moment. It may just be taking a second because I just put in the request just now. So we're just going to let it work its magic here. Joys of technology. Let me just do one other thing here. Okay. So this will take just a minute, but what it will start doing is it'll start doing the recovery process. And ultimately what will happen is we'll see some activity pop up here in the activity view. And you can see that you have the ability to filter by both recovery and by backup. But I feel pretty good right now. We've started the recovery process, and I've taken you through a couple different features here. Let me actually go ahead and pull back up our presentation here, because this actually wraps up the technical demonstration. So just to quickly summarize, we took a look at cloud security challenges and how you can address them using frameworks like the shared responsibility model and also the zero trust maturity framework, which was released from CISA. We took a look at how you could address these challenges using tools both within AWS and Cohesity solutions. And we also just took a look at how we can secure our AWS workloads using the Cohesity Data Protect service. This wraps up this session. I want to thank everyone for joining, and I hope you have a great Catalyst. Thanks, everyone.